Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Maggie Howell, and I'm the director of the Wolf Conservation Center here in South Salem, New York. A few items before we get started this evening. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box, and you can find that in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. We will provide time for questions at the end of tonight's talk. Also, a recorded version of the webinar will be available on our website in a day or two. So let's get down to this. Today, we're joined by Suzanne Stone, who has generously offered her time to discuss non-lethal wolf and livestock coexistence with the Wood River Wolf Project. Suzanne Stone has worked for over 3 decades to restore wolves to the Rockies and the Pacific Northwest. Initially, she served as an intern for the Central Idaho Wolf Steering Committee and as a member of the 1995 and 1996 USA-Canadian Wolf Reintroduction team, restoring wolves to Yellowstone National Park and also Central Idaho. From 1999 to 2019, she developed the Defenders of Wildlife wolf coexistence measures and models to minimize losses of livestock and gray wolves in the West. She's also the co-founder of the Wood River Wolf Project in Idaho and has won numerous awards for her leadership in wildlife conflict resolution and coexistence, including being a 2-time recipient of the Animal Welfare Institute's Christine Stevens Wildlife Award for innovative research on humane, non-lethal tools and techniques for wildlife conflict management. She is the lead author and researcher of adaptive use of non-lethal strategies for minimizing wolf-sheep conflict in Idaho, published by the Journal of Mammalogy in 2017. Suzanne is working now all over the world to help transform archaic wildlife management from lethal to humane, non-lethal methods. I'm really excited to get started with this, and I hope you guys are too. So I will now turn the time over to Suzanne. Suzanne, thank you for being here.
Maggie, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone there can hear me and that you guys are all doing very well wherever you are. Appreciate the opportunity to tell you about wolves in Idaho and throughout the world, actually, where we're working in trying to help reduce clicks and help people learn how to coexist with wolves. So I have a slide program I wanted to show you, and for those who don't have a lot of information about the wolf introduction in the Northern Rockies, there is quite a bit of information online. I know that Maggie's organization has a great deal on their website. We also have more information about the Idaho Wolf Reintroduction, kind of from the inside view of what was happening on the ground here. And there's the first chapter of my book. It's online right now. You guys are welcome to take a look at it. And I'm still working on it, but it's got a lot of details that most people don't know about that happened during the wolf introduction for Idaho and Yellowstone. So that's the forthewolves.org, and I'm excited to share that story and that background with those that are interested. But we're here to talk about coexistence and wolves, and specifically about wolves, sheep, Idaho, and what that means for wolves on the ground in one of the most difficult places to work for wolves probably in the world. Idaho has were reintroduced here at the same time that they were to Yellowstone during the mid-1990s. So we just celebrated a 25th anniversary of that occurring. But instead of really treating wolves as celebrities, Idaho tends to treat wolves more like villains. And unfortunately, we've seen a real push to persecute wolves again. We now are facing bounties on wolves in the state. A single person can kill up to 30 wolves or more in the course of a year. There's year-round hunting in a lot of places and trapping and snaring. Wolf dens hunters here can kill wolves at den sites. You know, it's just about as bad as it was long time ago, and we really hope that Idaho changes over time, that we learn that we can adapt to having wolves in our backcountry and that we can learn to live with them. That's really why it was so important to put this project here in Idaho, because it was essentially the worst case scenario, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So for those of you that don't know where Idaho is, we often get confused with Ohio or Iowa or Indiana or other places, but we're up in the Pacific Northwest. We're nestled between Washington and Oregon to the west, and Montana, and Yellowstone National Park, Utah and Wyoming to the east. And our project area is kind of central into the state. It's right in the lower end of the kind of central Idaho wilderness type area. Idaho has the largest contiguous mountainous wilderness area in the lower 48 states. So it's not all farmland here. We have quite a bit of public lands. In fact, 2/3 of our state is dedicated to public lands, both state and federal. Our project area started off in this area because people really liked wolves in Blaine County, which is the county that we're working in. However, Blaine County is also the seat for a number of sheep. In fact, they call it the sheep superhighway because there's so many sheep that come through this area every year. And wolves, like other wildlife, especially other predators like coyotes and bears, kill more sheep than they do any other type of livestock on the landscape. So these were the most significant problems that were occurring for wolves, and it was the reason that wolves were being killed in other places. When wolves get into trouble with livestock, often the states, especially states like Idaho and Wyoming, the first reaction is often to kill the wolves. So when wolves came to Blaine County for the first time, we had a lot of local excitement. We had kind of our own little mini Yellowstone, so people were going out and seeing the wolves. But at the same time, people were very unprepared for what was going to come next. When the wolves arrived, we knew that there was going to be some problems, and we looked at kind of a landscape level approach to trying non-lethal tools. I started working in the non-lethal world back in the 1990s when wolves were first reintroduced. We're just trying to learn more about what was it that we could do, what could precipitate stopping a conflict from occurring. So what would better protect livestock, therefore what would better protect the wolves on the landscape. What we learned is that at the time there was really no acceptance of it. Even the top wolf scientists in our country and others around the world just dismissed it as being too costly, too impractical, wasn't going to work. The feedback I received from the Fish and Wildlife Service was that bullets were cheap, and that this was just not a practical means for trying to manage these kind of conflicts. So we also uncovered during that time that no one had actually tried it. So we thought, let's give it a try and see if this is going to work. We were working with one rancher when all of a sudden we had a really big train wreck with another rancher in our region. And these sheep operations cover hundreds of miles. So while we were working with the one operation, another one came into this meadow system area where the wolves had started denning in Blaine County, and unloaded a few trucks, big 18-wheeler trucks full of over 1,000 sheep right into the same meadow system area where the wolves were denning. And for wolves, that kind of invasion it's troublesome having the sheep come in, but it was even worse for them, I think, having the dogs come in, because the biggest threat to wolf pups, to wolves raising their young, are strange wolves coming in and attacking the pack and attacking the pups. And wolves just think dogs are funny looking wolves, and they just feel like, they have to be really defensive, and that triggers that defense. So within 24 to 48 hours, we had dead sheep, dead livestock guardian dogs, and a control order out that the pack of wolves was going to be killed. We reached out to the ranchers that were in the area that we'd already been working with. I had a talk with him and one of the managers, as well as the Wildlife Services control specialists in the area, and we just said, what if? What if we could get everyone in this project area, all 5 of these large operations, working together to try these non-lethal tools? And so we asked them, and went to the state, went to the feds, and said, will you give us a chance? And they did. They surprised us and said, here you go, try your non-lethal tools. I think that they thought they were going to fail. And for the rest of the grazing season, we were able to keep the wolves and the livestock apart. And I'm going to show you a brief video that kind of describes, you'll see the landscape and some of the people involved and get a little bit better lay of the land. So let me know if this comes through for you okay.
Hi, Suzanne. It doesn't seem like there's any sound. Suzanne, can you hear me?
Hi, so I just got a text that you guys can't hear that sound. So I'm going to skip ahead then and we will include a link for you. Sorry about that. We've tested it earlier and it was working. So at least you got to see some of our landscape, and the area that we work in is incredibly rugged. It's one of the most high mountainous areas in the West, and it's an incredibly difficult place to work in. So we really had all of the elements kind of going against us. Thousands of sheep, somewhere between 10, 15 to 25,000 sheep in our project area over the course of time. People who didn't like wolves at all, and people who cared about them very much. And this kind of conflict sets up some real parallels and especially some polarization in the local community. So it was important for us to be able to bring everybody to the table, because if you don't have all the participants in a conflict like this, what you end up having is people working to undermine what you're trying to achieve. You've got to really bring everybody together. It has to be mutually beneficial. And because we didn't have laws protecting the wolves from this kind of lethal pressure, it was really up to the ranchers of whether or not they would be able to survive in our project areas. So lots and lots of pressure here on the community, on the ranchers in the area, on the wolves, on the sheep, on everybody to try to get this right. But we set up the project in 2008, and we decided that we were going to focus on some very minimal goals, because there was so much disagreement about whether wolves should be there or not, whether we should be managing them one way or not. All of that we had to leave outside the room when we came together to focus on what the project was actually going to do. And that was, we decided to test these non-lethal tools and see if they're practical across this large landscape. So here's a picture that gives you an idea of what our project area is like. We had a few radio-collared wolves early on in the project. We don't anymore and haven't had them for years. But it was really nice when we did have radio collars, because we were able to study where the packs were pretty easily and learn where they were denning, where they were moving their den sites and then to rendezvous sites to raise their pups, and then what they did for the rest of the season. After that, we had to rely more on things like tracking, being able to look at wolf tracks, howling. We did a lot of howling surveys. We did a lot of camera surveys in the area, trying to determine where the wolves were occurring and how they might overlap with the sheep. Speaking of sheep, we also had to increase the number of sheepdogs that were out there. So traditionally with these ranchers, with a band of sheep, they might have had 1 or 2 dogs, and 1 or 2 dogs is not a very big wolf pack. When you're using livestock guardian dogs, you want to make sure that you have enough dogs to be able to give the impression of a pack of wolves. You also, as I said earlier, you want to avoid having these livestock guardian dogs near den sites, because the dogs themselves can become the bigger attractant. And then you're going to run into a much bigger problem than just having sheep out there. So we had to be able to alternate the different types of deterrents that we had out there in order to protect the dogs, and also increase the number of dogs that we were using on the landscape later, so they'd sound like big wolf packs and the wolves would avoid them. Herders, we have herders in our area, and they are the first line of defense for anything that's occurring with the sheep operations. So it was really important to us to help learn what they needed to be out on the landscape, what their needs were in terms of herding the sheep. So we learned a lot more about sheep than we ever thought we were going to. And then also to be able to support them and give them the tools that they needed to help learn how to use these deterrents. So we did a lot of training with them as well. So they are, there you are, our first lines of defense right there, and they are the most important people out on the project, including the little 4-legged guy on the side there. And those are the ones that really see and know what's happening in this project area from day to day. So when I told you about the train wreck earlier, this is where it occurred. And so normally when sheep are out at night, they're dispersed out onto this hillside, as you can see to the left. But then when we came in to help with the wolves in this first situation, we were able to put the sheep behind something called Turbofladry. This is a technique that was picked up out of Europe, Eastern Europe actually, and it used to be that villagers would put their clothing on either poles or ropes and set it up in a big V shape, and it was used for hunters to be able to more easily kill wolves. And my graduate advisor, Marco Musiani, brought it back from Europe to the United States and started testing it in a domestic wolf or a captive wolf situation. And this was one of the bigger tests that we did out on the landscape afterwards. But this has been a very effective tool for us. We just don't use it very often because we have other tools that work really well, and it does take for about half an hour to 45 minutes or so to set up one that's this big. But for the rest of the grazing season that summer, we didn't have another sheep lost to wolves. And the response from the agencies at that point was, well, you got lucky. Can you do it again? So we had to look and try to examine, what do we want to get out of this? And we thought, well, they're right. Let's try it again, and let's set it up for a 3-year demonstration project, which is what we did. We started adding the number of tools that we had to the project as well. So these yellow devices, let's see if I can do this, get a laser pointer here, that are right up here on your screen. That is called FoxLights. I brought those from Australia to North America and started using them about 7 or 8 years ago. It was the first place that was used in North America was in the project area. And these things are brilliant. They're produced by a fellow by the name of Ian Whalen, and they look like somebody walking around in the woods with a flashlight. They have strobe colors, they're very random. It's just an excellent tool giving the impression that humans are there, and that's really what you want to occur. We also had this here, don't be worried, this is a starter pistol. You heard that in the video, or maybe you didn't because you didn't hear the video, but that's a starter pistol, and it just has that pop gun noise. We love these. They're air horns, and the air horns and these high beam flashlights are really super effective. There's all kinds of tools now. Critter getters is something that we're using in different areas. And there's other tools you would use for like cattle operations, and I'll get into those in just a little bit as well. So with the project underway and trying to determine how are these tools effective, what we had to do is try to collect as much data as we could on how the tools were being used, and then what was the effect. And so one of our best tools for being able to document that was using the cameras. And the cameras would help us then be able to detect the sheep. And you can see with this picture that wolf is rolling in sheep poo less than 48 hours the sheep have been through. So they were definitely overlapping a lot. We were also collecting data on when they were howling, when there was tracks around, just trying to really make sure that we were able to know what kind of response we were getting. We collected all this, you got lucky for the 3 years, and we want you to go for more time. So we set it up as a 7-year project, expanding the size of the project area, almost doubling. And then in comparison to the sheep operations that were adjacent to us and other national forest areas inside the county. So the ones that were operating, sometimes they would come in through the county, sometimes it'd be the same sheep, sometimes it would be the same wolves. But what was happening in areas where the sheep operations where they were not using non-lethal. And the thing that we were able to document from that is that during that first 7 years, we ended up having 30 sheep that were killed out of the 10, 15 to 20,000 sheep or more that we had in the project area. And they had 314. And so if we weighted those so that we had even number of sheep days out there and an even number of sheep days both within the project area and what we learned is that for every essentially 5 sheep that we lost, they lost 20. And they were using lethal control to kill wolves. So they would kill entire wolf packs when these things would occur, which meant that, that there was constantly changing happening within the wolf packs. Sometimes there would be fewer wolves, sometimes new wolves would be moving into that area, but they were still killing a lot of wolves. And we did not. We didn't have a single wolf killed in our project area in that 7-year period. Since the project started 12 years ago, now we're in year 13, we've only had 1 wolf killed, and we have an average of just under 4 sheep a year that have been killed by wolves during this time. And let's see, so this is just kind of shows you a graph of what was happening in the unprotected area versus the protected area. I have a whole paper out on this. You can pick that up online, and I'll show you a picture of the copy of the paper so that you can pull that up. This just shows you the map of Idaho. They were tracking, the state was tracking the number of depredations that were occurring, sheep losses to wolves. And these are the areas, it used to be that we had more significant problems in our project area, but once it started, as you can see, it's the lightest, the fewest number of sheep losses in the state in that region. Here's the paper, it's Journal of Mammalogy. You can find this online, we have free access for it. And if you just Google my last name, Stone, wolves, Idaho, and sheep, you'll probably run right into it. It's really easy to find, but if you need anything more, I'm happy to share that too. So with a project like this, we are constantly changing the tools that we're using. That's probably one of the main things that we need to convey, is that the name of our paper is Adaptive Use of Non-Lethal Strategies. When you are using these tools, you want to make sure that wolves don't habituate to any one particular tool. And the way that they do, that you achieve that, is by changing up the number of tools, the types of tools that you're using over and over again, just so that they don't have, they don't lose their fear of one particular tool. Because once they have, and you have a stable wolf pack, then that tool is no longer one that you can use in your toolbox. You also want to maintain the wolves that you have, because if you know a lot about the pack and that pack is stable, then their behavior is much easier to anticipate from year to year. So that's extremely helpful, and it's been more and more difficult for us to do that as Idaho has become more and more aggressive in killing wolves. This year is going to be quite the real challenge for us, I think, with the new regulations allowing more people to kill them, and now year-round in a lot of the areas around us, and including parts of our project area. So it's kind of stay tuned, and we will be reporting on that. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the key elements that we found have been extremely helpful in a project like this. Training the herders, and having good field technicians. We do occasionally use volunteers, but really having trained field technicians is probably the most important thing. There's also using multiple guarding dogs after the spring denning season is extremely important. And we use the big white dogs. We don't use the more aggressive ones because we have a lot of recreationists in our area, and the dogs are really there to be a warning device. They're the alarm clock. They're what should be waking you up in the night and saying, hey, there's trouble nearby, and then people should be there to help reinforce them. We've never wanted to use the dogs as like attack dogs. That's not their purpose. Having the established packs, and then doing a lot of monitoring to making sure that the wolves are, kind of following their usual behavior. Having the right tools in place, and that includes with our projects, we've had the Flattering, the sound alarms, the lights, but there's other things that we found along the way. One of them is having a good communication system in place. That's probably one of the most important things, and particularly because our herders are from South America. They don't speak English, so we have to have people on the project that speak fluent Spanish in order to make sure that our communication with them. We've had the best success when we've had project team members that could understand and communicate with them in their own language. Strong collaboration model, making sure that the community is heavily involved, that there's a reciprocal thing of, in place where you're providing a service for the ranchers, and in turn they're cooperating with you. And that's, that's really the basic underlying strength of this project, is that it's been a community project for a long time now, and it then becomes a model. This is something that can be duplicated in other areas, and that's incredibly important for other projects to know. I'm working with people in Israel right now that are right in the Golan Heights up on the Syrian border, and having the community engaged in this is going to be a really important factor of helping to protect the wolves and reduce some of the conflicts that are going on there. But this stuff is occurring worldwide, and these definitely can be done. These models can be adapted to anywhere. Funding, it's always a struggle. This year is going to be, in particular, we've, and everyone's hurting right now because of what's going on with the COVID-19 outbreak, but it's going to be a seriously big challenge for us this year because we have additional pressure on the wolves. We want to be able to document what happens to the wolves in the project area and how they respond to this added increase. So funding is going to be one of the biggest concerns that we have going forward this year. I love this quote. I always try to include it. This is Larry Schoen on the left here, and he's the former county commissioner, serves on our committee. Just you know, if you approach this from a can-do attitude of that you can prevent depredations in the first place, you can, it truly turns into the least costly alternative. We don't spend money on helicopters killing wolves. We don't, we actually can show that we've saved both livestock guardian dogs and sheep, and we've done it in a manner that is less expensive than the more archaic practices of killing wolves as the reaction to that. And we still, our community loves its sheep. We have an annual Trailing of the Sheep festival every year. They come parade the sheep right through the middle of downtown. There's bagpipers and dancers and weaving contests, and you know, it's a big part of the heritage for the local area. So yeah, it's still very much an important part of the community thread. I did want to just mention cattle. You know, I know we're going to be really focused right now on the sheep operation because we're looking at the Wood River Wolf Project, but I also work on a large number of cattle operations, and there are also tools, great methods that can help with minimizing conflicts with predators, particularly with wolves. And if there's more information you'd like to get, then I'd be happy to share that with Maggie afterwards too. Well, if you have any questions, these are our project partners. Big thanks to these folks. We would not be able to make it without them. And I think that's it. So thank you. And I'm going to end this slideshow here. We might have to come back to it, but then if I do that, hopefully I'll be able to get back in where I can see all of y'all. Okay. So, Maggie, are you handy here? Let's see. I guess they're rounding up questions for us here, so I'm going to hold off until we can hear. All right, let's see. Oh, you can't unmute. Okay. So Maggie's saying that she's having trouble unmuting. So I guess I'm going to read some of these questions until we can get her unmuted. And let's see. Oh, Norm Bishop was on. Hey, Norm, good to see you. Miss you guys. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Have you heard of a cattle rancher in Oregon who's using dogs to teach cattle to act more like bison? There's quite a few cattle ranchers that are using dogs, you know, and it's not just the dogs that are helping them act more like bison. There's some ranchers that are using just their own herding techniques and kind of re-encouraging those cattle to adopt herding techniques again, to just encourage that instinct in them. And I think that's been incredibly successful in terms of minimizing the threat of predation from especially wolves, but this is even working in grizzly country, which is a really tough thing to do. So I would encourage you to look at places like the Tom Minor Basin, to look at the Anderson Ranch in Montana. The Blackfoot Challenge has been working effectively in that. There's quite a few different operations, and there's a Western Alliance of landowners that have a tremendous livestock and wolves guide out. So I will make sure that Maggie has a link to that we can include to share with you guys as well. There's some great ways to coexist between cattle and sheep. So Laura is asking, what can we do to help? Thank you. That's a great question. And you can go to our website, because the next question is there a way to donate money? You can go to our website at thewoodriverwolfproject.org, and we definitely have a donation button there. If you want to help us, we would deeply appreciate the support. And then if there's other things you want to do, if you look at this stuff, and when we started this, the non-lethal tools were not common. They were pretty much unheard of. In fact, the Fish and Wildlife Service here in the region pretty much dismissed them. I mean, we had one person, which is Carter Niemeyer here in Idaho with the service, who believed in it and helped mentor our project. But it was hard to find other federal and state wildlife managers who would trust this stuff at all. Now that has changed so much, and you're seeing states like Oregon and Washington, Montana, that are building their focus on non-lethal, and they're having such great success with it. So it's definitely something you would want to duplicate. And as we look at places like Colorado, how exciting that there's going to be an opportunity perhaps for wolves in Colorado to benefit from all of this knowledge and hopefully not make some of the same mistakes that were made other places. So thanks for that
Hi,
question.
Suzanne. I
Yay.
somehow got released. So that was very strange. So my apologies.
No worries.
And my apologies to everyone joining us. And for anyone that's joined late, just so you know what you've been learning about and who you've been listening to, we're here with Suzanne Stone. And she's been gracious enough to come and really offer her time to discuss non-lethal coexistence with livestock, and of course the Wolfwood Project. And so you've already answered a lot of questions, which is great. There are a few here in the dozen in the Q&A box. A lot of questions that people are asking are about the attitude of that people have towards wolves in Idaho, and if that is seems more extreme in terms of, I guess, the negative feelings they have than some of the other states out west. And the ones mentioned specifically have been Montana and Minnesota, so a different region.
Yeah, it is frustrating working in Idaho, and it really isn't based on the real impacts so much as it is about the resentment of having wolves back here, and just people focused on trying to make wolves the enemy rather than learning how to coexist with them. And it's been a super big challenge to be able to try to work in a state where we're getting almost no support or pushback from the state and the Federal Wildlife Services program. And it's I hope that will change, because certainly it's changing in the other states around us. And hopefully that those examples and the example that we're working with the Wood River Project, where people can work collaboratively to minimize those conflicts, I'm hoping eventually that that's going to wear it down, where it's not about, hating or villainizing wolves, but just accepting that they are just another critter on the landscape, and that there are very good ways that you can help ranchers coexist with them.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it's tough working in this state.
There are also a lot of questions from this theme, really about the different tools that you discussed. And if you're changing the tools regularly, how long can you use a particular tool before they get used to it? And what happens if you run out of tools?
Well, thankfully we haven't run out of tools before, but we come close, and then we get really, really creative. So, it's almost like you're approaching this thing as if you're a detective, right? You're anticipating, what's causing the attraction. You've got to be able to understand that. So why are wolves being attracted to this area? You can look at examples like in Oregon. The first depredations that occurred on a sheep operation there too, in Baker County. And wolves came in and started killing lambs in this big pasture. Well, when the biologist went out and looked, he noticed that there was a horrible smell coming from just to the west of the pasture, and found that there were a couple hundred dead carcasses out there, livestock that had been dumped out there. And wolves are scavengers as well as being predators. So a free meal for them as a scavenger is pretty safe bet. those wolves came from probably 10 miles away to investigate that big, huge carcass pit. And when they got there, they made the same decision you and I would make, which is, let's see, maggoty old rotten bones or fresh spring lamb. And of course, they got in quite a bit of trouble for going after the fresh spring lamb. And we were able to put in then some flattery around the area and then help secure it. The biggest thing was cleaning up the carcass pit. So, you know, and if you look at where wolves will go on the landscape, that was another thing that came out of the research from Oregon, is that they were documenting that wolves would actually travel into the valley floor, you know, near people, which is not normally their behavior. And they would do it during the middle of the night, and they were going to these same areas over and over again. And what they've discovered in working with the ranchers is that those were more carcass pits. So, you know, there's some predictable behavior there that if you can eliminate those carcass pits, you've eliminated an attractant for them. So getting rid of those attractants is like step one. And then once you understand kind of what tools are going to be needed and for how long those tools are going to be needed, then you can decide, am I going to try Flattering, and in which case Flattering is about a 30 to 45 day effectiveness before you want to completely change it out. We added turbo for the electricity to it years ago, so it probably has a longer life than that, but I think it's best to not go more than a couple months before you switch it out with something, you know, and maybe it's adding FoxLights, or maybe it's bringing in, you know, the alarm systems, or there's all kinds of things you can try. There's a rancher, again, over in Oregon, who is doing an even better job than what we're doing. And I mean, he's basically building Fort Knox around his sheep operations. I don't think he's lost a single sheep in an area where we had one rancher there that was driven out of business because he was losing so many. And so, but this guy is he's really on top of it. And he's coming up with new tools, new methods that are coming from the ranching community to help us with these you know, these problems. I have to admit, the funniest tool I've ever used is you know, the air dancers that are at the car lots and stuff. You see them? Yeah. Okay. I got desperate and used one of those ones, and you know what? It worked. It worked great, and we've used it. I used it in a couple of 2-3 places now, and it's, you know, under the right setting, it's a great tool to have.
Yeah, they're
Wolves
pretty creepy.
Like yeah.
Well, that's amazing too to hear that such progress in Oregon within the community there. And you know, it's funny because there are questions, a few of them, I'm trying to condense them and just try to cover a few at the same time, that are referring to livestock carcasses. And if there is any sort of mandate in Idaho that if you know, your sheep or cow dies, that animal is removed or treated or rendered, you know, inedible, to prevent exactly what you've described with those carcass pits.
No, I think that's required in Washington, Oregon, California, but it's not required in Idaho. Yeah, we're still fighting that battle.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
This is a good question. What costs are actually involved in all of these methods, and how do they get funded?
So we average probably about, we're guessing it's somewhere between $1 to $2 per sheep in our project area. So we have somewhere between, I don't know, 15,000 to 22,000 sheep in the project area, which is, you know, that's a full year summer grazing season project cost. And so it's pretty, you know, it's fairly minimal, but it does require that there's a field technician, that we have equipment that's available, that equipment is maintained, and that it gets out to the producers. So you've got travel costs, you've got equipment costs. Things like the FoxLights cost about $130, I think, for the solar powered ones. Those are excellent tools, and we try to make sure that each band has 4, 5, or 6 of those, you know, available. There's we've got one right now. We've got a volunteer that's been working with the project because we've had tough years in funding, not being able to fully fund the project, and he's just been an incredible volunteer, and just hikes and hikes and hikes and meets with the herders, and and is monitoring wolves quite a bit, but I don't know what we do without him. So, you know, having to replace Kurt would be pretty expensive. And, you know, in a fully funded year, we probably would look at closer to $50,000 if we were really fully funding what we were doing. That said, if you compare that to how much it costs to kill wolves, I mean, if we could just shift that cost from the federal program of killing wolves to using these non-lethal tools, you know, we've seen states where just killing one wolf pack costs them $80,000 in helicopters fees, and that's just, you know, one event. You know, this is something that our grazing season runs from essentially the end of May till mid-October. So we're doing a pretty good job at keeping the costs down. And we have to, because we want to make sure that these are practical tools that anyone could adopt, and not, you know, if they were too expensive, then you wouldn't be able to use them in other places. You know, they just wouldn't be sustainable. But this is definitely, these tools are definitely sustainable over the long term. Yeah. And then, you know, just to add, we're going into year 13 right now. You know, we've had less than 50 sheep killed in our project area during that course of that first 13 so far, 12 years. So this project then becomes a model for others. And I think that that's one of the most important things about it, is that when I go out and meet with people like in Australia and parts of Europe and the Middle East, and I mean, it's with encouragement that these things can work in their own communities. If it can work here, truly, it can work anywhere. And that's a message that I think really resonates and gives people hope.
Oh, it is encouraging. So, you know, and it's interesting because given the success that you've had with the non-lethal methods, why is it that Idaho does, you know, resorts to such extreme, heavy-handed management and lethal methods of controlling the wolf population?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's in spite of what we're doing, and we attend every fish and game meeting that we can. The Wolf Control Board, the state of Idaho has set up a fund that was put up with the help of the Idaho Wildlife Services Program, where they are allocating $400,000 a year just to kill wolves. And in fact, the way that they wrote the language was it prevented any of the money to be used for non-lethal measures. So, you know, there's just this real strong pushback that somehow if they accept the non-lethal measures and they are participate in that, I think they just then feel like they're accepting wolves. And there's still quite a few people here that just don't accept them at all. It's just in the fiber of the political system here, which is very much controlled by the state agricultural industry. And it's unfortunate because it's a fight that doesn't need to happen. We found that even if we disagree with the ranchers at the table, you know, I enjoy working with them, and that they're willing to participate. You know, I admire that, and that they were able to set aside the politics and participate in this project is pretty remarkable. So if we just put our energy and our resources into fixing problems, those problems would really dramatically decline. But there are some people that are more invested in the fight than in the solutions.
There are also a lot of questions here, since you've mentioned you know, places from all over the world, if there are differences between US and European or Australian livestock management practices that impact livestock and wolf conflict or predator conflict.
Yeah, so yeah, I just saw one come in from Northern Italy. Hi guys, I can't believe you're up in the middle of the night. Thank you. But yeah, they have about 2,000 wolves in the state or in the country, and talking about them coming into farms and killing the farm dogs and stuff. I mean, it's about how wolves perceive dogs as being funny looking wolves, and you can protect them. We have plenty of ranches that have farm dogs that are right in the same situation where they, you know, where the wolves are coming into the areas where the farms are. it's a matter of understanding kind of what the wolf is there for and what is the cause of that attraction, and then being able to better protect the livestock and the dogs that are there, especially in the springtime, because the wolves are so protective of their pups in the spring, and that usually is what causes a lot of that aggression toward dogs, because they're afraid that the dogs are going to kill their pups, and it triggers that knee-jerk reaction back to be very defensive of those pups. And you see it happen in places like Yellowstone, where neighboring packs go in and kill each other's pups. And it's, so it's just kind of understanding that basic element of wolf behavior, what triggers that reaction. But there are, we're working in one of the most difficult places. It'd be like the Alps, I think, where you have a very remote area, very mountainous, not a lot of people back there, and we're making it work. But farms, much easier places to be working in than where we are. I mean, ours is literally one of the worst case scenarios, and if we can make it work there, then we know, and we've tried, and in farms and stuff, we've had some really good success in those areas. So it's it's always worth pursuing and getting help from people that have the experience, because none of these tools work if they're not used Flattering, but they didn't hang it right. And if you don't hang it right, it is not a deterrent to wolves. We've had flashing lights where people have overused them, and it just becomes something that is no longer a good tool. So, really having someone to help you understand what the core problems are and how to address those based on your landscape, the type of livestock you have, all of that is super important. And I'll put in a link here to that wildlife, the Western Landowners Alliance, because they have a great publication on some of these non-lethal tools.
Well, that's great, thank you. And
yeah,
among those tools, someone's asking, is there any truth to donkeys and llamas being used as wolf deterrents?
Well, llamas, in my case, I've seen llamas, they're more like wolf candy. They seem to be something that wolves are attracted to, and they're not very good at defending themselves. But donkeys is a different story. And I'm still anxious to really get out and try more of the donkeys, because I think that they have potentially they could be a great tool. And we've seen them used in places like Texas, where they use them against wild dogs, feral dogs, and they're extremely effective in those areas. Donkeys, if they're raised right, they have a very strong aversion to unfamiliar canines, and they can be pretty intimidating. So I think they would do a good job, but again, it has to be under the right circumstances.
Yeah, and they're pretty cute too.
They are. They're sweet. Yeah.
So this is kind of a loaded question, but what's the biggest challenge today?
Well, part of it's funding, because there hasn't been an emphasis on trying to fund this. And I have to give credit to Cory Booker's staff. They have just been incredible. And for the last 2 years now, they've been able to get over $1 million allocated to non-lethal management through the wildlife services programs where wolves are present across the country. And it's a demonstration project, basically like ours was to begin with, but at least it's starting to make real change. And this year they're going to be evaluating, doing research on some of the non-lethal measures, but having him champion the non-lethal coexistence efforts, we have to have more people like that understand that we can either spend money on killing wildlife once there's a problem and dealing with these conflicts, and they don't go away after that. Once you've killed wolves, for example, more wolves are going to move in, and you're going to have that same problem 6 months from now, or a year from now, maybe 18 months from now, but it will come back because the wolves are attracted to that area. If those same vulnerabilities are there when they get there, it means that you're going to see those wolves killed, and then that whole cycle repeats again. And what we've been able to show is that you can stop that cycle, you can protect the livestock, you can protect the wolves, and you can do it for less money. It can be done, and it can be done anywhere.
That's really encouraging. And just quickly, I'm going to backtrack to initially, There's a lot of questions, Suzanne, first of all. So my apologies for kind of putting them all together. But there are a lot of questions about radio collaring and how come that practice stopped.
Well, again, back to Idaho, they only feel like they have to account for 15 breeding pairs because the Fish and Wildlife Service set the recovery bar so low. So when the wolves were delisted from federal protection in 2011, the states basically had a wolf plan that had been rejected, I think it was 17 times by the Fish and Wildlife Service. They eventually approved the 18th plan, but it only allows for protection, or minimal protection for the 15 breeding pairs in the state, or 150 wolves plus. We have more wolves than that here now, thankfully, because of that wilderness area that I talked about. But it is still, they don't feel like they need to be spending money on radio collaring wolves when they're not responsible for having more than those 15 breeding pairs. And then, so those packs typically do get radio collars. Unfortunately, they're using a lot of the radio collars to do things like what they've done every year now, to go in by helicopter into the Lolo district up in the northern part of the state where there are no livestock, where they're more concerned about elk population numbers, which were already way in decline before wolves came to Idaho, because the habitat there doesn't support the elk numbers that used to be there after a huge fire in the early 19th century. And so they're going in, they're radio culling wolves there every summer, and then they go in and during the winter time, they chase them down by helicopter and kill all but the wolf that has the radio collar. So it loses its whole pack, all of its family, year after year. And they've started doing that other places around the state now as well. And, you know, it's just heartbreaking because it has no impact on whether the elk are going to survive or not. If they don't have the habitat, it doesn't matter whether there's wolves there or not. They're never going to rebound in that area until that habitat changes, or they need to really just adjust and accept that the fact that it no longer can sustain that what was at one time the largest elk herd in the western United States. And you know, wolves become the scapegoat for that. But they call them Judas wolves, and it's just devastating what actually happens to these wolves.
Yeah, and there are a lot of questions asking, how do you personally manage to keep it together when you see so much devastation to those families and those individuals and the population in general?
It's hard. You know, I'm writing a book right now, and so a lot of their stories, the stories of the wolves that I've worked with, are going to be highlighted. A lot of the people that have done incredible things that no one really knows about. I'm trying to get that information out so that, you know, it's preserved, so you know who the heroes were and who made huge differences along the way. People like Michael Blake, who is the author of Dances with Wolves. People don't know that he actually helped save the wolves in the Wolf Reintroduction for Idaho and Yellowstone National Park. So there's been so many people that have come through and given us encouragement. And, you know, on a personal level, it means going out and working in places like Australia, like Israel, like Oregon, where people get it. You know, they understand that these tools are effective. They're a great way of learning how to live with nature. And we have to turn that corner, because we can't continue to live, our societies cannot continue to live in war with nature as we have been. So going to those places, it rejuvenates the soul.
That's great. And this is a little bit different, but interesting question. Are there any effective natural deterrents, like plants or other wild species or natural materials, which can be used as a non-lethal tool?
Natural deterrents. Yeah, I guess the dancing man would not qualify for that. You know, I guess removing carcasses is a big thing. I mean, wolves, they smell the world in a way that's completely foreign to us. So if you think about it, in our brain, our interpretive center for scent, olfactory, it's about the size of of a pea, right? And a wolf's brain, it's the size of your fist, you know, so their whole world is about scent. You know, they can walk through the woods and smell a trail. They can know which wolf was there, how long ago it was there. I mean, I think that's how they've went from wolves in Idaho that then crossed into Oregon, that then led to R7 going down into California. And he basically, you know, blazed a trail through there. But he was following the trail of other wolves that had gone through as well. And so, you know, thinking about the organic parts of their behavior, much of the way that you have to think about it is in terms of what are the scents out there? What is the world telling them through that particular interpretation of the world? And it's pretty exciting stuff when you start thinking about, you know, well, if they're interpreting the world this way, you know, we're just starting to learn of the things that, how they interpret the world, and how, you know, how we can respond better to make sure that they stay safe and they stay out of livestock. So, you know, it's a good question, and I'd say keep tuned. And if you're a student, you know, we need researchers. I mean, that's the biggest thing right now, is getting more people into this field so that they can study these things and do it from out of the box thinking, because the in the box thinking doesn't work. You have to be more creative, and you have to, you know, tackle this thing from the most uncommon ways, you know, and just accept that, you know, these traditional methods are not going to be the answer. So if you're students out there, please, the non-lethal field, the coexistence field, we need you.
Definitely. And actually someone, it's a good comment in regards to a natural deterrent to livestock depredation. Maintaining stable wolf packs would be a good start.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The more stable that they are, the more you can predict their behavior. And, you know, when you break packs apart, it's often the teenagers that get left on their own. And wolves do not learn how to hunt till they're like 9 or 10 months old. They can't hunt on their own until they're that age. So if you have these younger teenage wolves out there that don't have the adults with them to help them understand and learn how to be wolves, you know, it creates its own repercussions, and then you're going to see more and more livestock losses because of it.
Definitely. So I guess I think what we should maybe end on is just how people can help you, how they can help the Wood River Wolf Project. Someone even mentioned, and I don't know if they are a law student in Idaho, but if there are any law students in Moscow that, you know, wants to somehow support you and get a sister program going on, but from the legal angle. But what can everyone do for you?
Wow. Yes. So I just typed in the Wood River Wolf Project's website address, and if you go there, please, even if it's a $5 donation, sign up our newsletter, go to our Facebook page. You know, we need that support. And yes, legal support, advocates for the West, Earth Justice have been real heroes out here in the West, and they've done incredible work for wolves. Unfortunately, we don't have federal protection for wolves. And that's one thing that, you know, as we're looking right now, the Trump administration is trying to strip wolves of federal protection everywhere. So, you know, most states aren't going to be as tough on wolves as Idaho has been, but it still makes a huge difference when you have that good federal protection overlap, because then you have the power of the Endangered Species Act then to be able to help protect those wolves and keep them sustained over the longer term. And so maintaining that's is important. It's very important. And then, you know, beyond that, just sharing information with people about, you know, what's happening to your wildlife. And even if you don't have wolves in your state, get onto, if you can, the wildlife commissions. Go to the meetings, the state wildlife meetings, because that's where the decisions get made. And it's going to be decisions that may not, you know, if you don't have wolves there, it's still going to affect coyotes or bear or deer or, you know, all of these other species that often just kind of get thrown under the bus when there's conflict. So, you know, if you're there and you have a heart for this coexistence effort, the research is available. Please get engaged and start showing up for those meetings, and always go to them. Make sure that you're present there, because we are the voice for wildlife. And if we don't show up for those meetings, then there are other people do. And they're the folks that often don't understand the value of having such diverse biodiversity out on the landscape, and trying to be compassionate in how we manage our relationship with nature.
Definitely. And, you know, first of all, I apologize to the people who maybe did not have their question answered. There's just too many coming in. But definitely take down that information from that chat. And also, when we do post the recorded version of this webinar, we will have those links, as well as your 2017 paper, and any other resources you want up there, Suzanne will put up there.
Yep.
Because just sharing this information far and wide is definitely a good start. So,
Yep.
Suzanne, I just can't thank you enough for joining us tonight, and I apologize to everybody, and to you, Suzanne, for ghosting you. It was very strange on my end too.
Yeah, no worries.
I was blaming my cat who was walking across my desk. So
yeah,
but,
I have my own little girl down here right now, so she's
there you go,
keeping me company. But I'm happy to come back anytime that you want to, you know, talk about cattle. You want to, whatever. I'm happy to share information about what's going on in Israel or Australia. You know, there's exciting things happening all over the world. And I cannot wait to see where we go 10, 20, 50 years from now, and how we change the paradigm of predator management, wildlife management in general.
Amen.
Yay.
Well, thank you again. And everyone else, we appreciate you being here too. Again, if you'd like to learn more about Suzanne's great work, we will have that link on our website as well, or you can go to the chat box, and please support. Let's try to make this model travel to not just to other places in the world, but other states right here in our own country. Yay. And if you want to learn more about the Wolf Conservation Center, as well as the 44 wolves who currently call the Wolf Center home, just please visit our website. It's www.nywolf.org. So again, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you for leading this discussion on this really important topic, and everyone else, thank you for joining. And I'm just so thrilled to see just so much interest and excitement about this topic. So
yeah, stay safe, everybody. Stay well.
You too. All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all.